It's Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. Let's start the show with Lewis Tennant. Here we go. Guests and interviews that you're looking for with creators, innovators, and so much more. For all episodes and further info, verbalhighs.com is the place to go.
All right, welcome to Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs, a podcast podcasted weekly from a kitchen bench in Kingston, Auckland, New Zealand. My name is Lewis, and I'm the host of the show, and I chat to people, and then I post those conversations up once a week, and then people listen. They're called podcasts, and they're great. My guest this week is Rob Warner. He has had a success in the past week with a project that he has been tirelessly and often solitarily involved. Is that a word? Solitarily? Solely involved with over the past 4 years. Decided to become involved with the collaborative process that was an open discussion in a court of law about what Auckland's liquor trading laws are to be going forward into the future. Why would a man who doesn't sell finest spirits or own a venue or perhaps work for the police, why would a man want to get involved with such things? Well, a number of reasons as unfold on the podcast, but principally the way I saw it is it's someone who discovered a love of electronic music in the early 90s, then subsequently discovered a love of the kind of ethos and vibe of the environments where such music is played. Such music and environments happen to often occur into the wee small hours, and Rob, like a lot of us, saw press coverage of absolutely and admittedly and 100% horrible events like what the press have dubbed king hitting in places like Auckland and Sydney and other cities around the world, and there has been a push for the actions of a few to affect the many in terms of what I will call very draconian laws, early closures, and so on. So Rob's argument was, or actually he's a PR man, he's a public relations practitioner. His PR campaign was to explain to those who were perhaps unaware but held the keys to power and decision making what that culture is, down to even, I read a bit of the PDF, what DJ culture is, what dance culture is, and argue that if occurring in venues with correct door policies and so on, the crowd generally, there's no absolutes for everything, of course, are generally drawn to the music and the event before the rapid and ferocious consumption of liquor. So whether or not you think that's even an issue, there's obviously wider issues of what we want our cities to entail, both for ourselves and for guests. One I think is hugely important. What or how or what, how, when, where, why, or whether. Well, that's a good word. Whether we should sit back and allow the knowledge and decision-making powers of a few dictate the many. You've got to remember, I think, you don't remember, you haven't heard it yet, for about a couple to 3 hours a night, 5 nights a week for 3 or 4 years, as Rob talks about, he schooled himself in order that when he schooled others, in this case that's just run, he'd be able to stand on his own 2 feet at all time, be able to quote peer-reviewed studied experts and so on and so forth. So he got in there and actually did something. I thought about this too today, just to cap off my kind of key feelings about this. And I'm guilty of this as well, say climate change, and I read a really well-argued article, and then I throw it up on Facebook, and I don't really do a lot of other stuff, even though I'm trying. This is a good example, I think, of the fact that we, being individuals or smaller pockets of people or people from subcultures and so on, wherever you are, can affect change. You can get involved in the decision-making process. I'll let Rob in the pod speak for itself. He's an interesting man. My guests often are. That's the idea. We also talk a bit of nerdy, boffinery, music-y, DJ stuff. We talk some media analysis. Rob was one of the first people to be a postgrad student in the degree, or program rather, or in the school that I now teach in, communications. My headphones have gone on the bung, folks. Don't ask. I haven't asked a lot on this podcast, but if anyone wants to, I think a podcast would be a great place to endorse a pair of lovely cans. Does anyone know any headphone distributors? I'd love a pair. verbalhighs@gmail.com. Hey, if you don't ask, you don't receive, eh? Okay. Like the show. Oh, great feedback and lots of listens for Greg Churchill's episode last week. This is maybe the natural progression to another long-standing member of Auckland's DJ and dance community. Like the show, Verbal Highs podcast on Facebook, Verbal Highs Twitter. New faces popping up every week. Hello to you all. I have a website, verbalhighs.com, but you probably click through to that if you found this on the social media. And also, let's get up to 10 ratings on iTunes. I've got 8 thus far, and thank you to you 8, whoever you are. I'm sure there was something else I meant to drop on y'all before we chat to Rob. No, perhaps that's it. Okay, all the best.
This is Dr. Janet's Verbal Highs.
This podcast might be a bit of comedy because the landlord is working on building next door. And this is the first time that he and I have clashed. So I texted him. I said, "Can you please not use the power tools?" And he texted back and said, "I need to use them, and so I might even use the big saw."
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we'll wait to see how we go. See if we get drowned out.
Fair enough.
By machinery.
Yeah.
You sound fine. I might just leave these on, actually, if you don't mind.
Yeah, cool. As long as you can do your do.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting. Actually, I did actually quick look last night through the list, and I had actually listened to Andy Pickering's one and Dave Roper's
right.
ones, because Andy Pickering's one interested me because he posted it about the joining the cult.
Yeah.
And I've known Dave for 25 years.
Which Dave? Dave Roper?
Dave Roper, yeah.
Yeah, that was a good.
And of course, Greg and I DJ together at the boxing.
Did you go to his
Oro?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Enjoy it?
It was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah. I think that he, as is often the case with your first one, I think he may have taken a bit of a hit on it.
Yeah.
But I would assume that there's a long-term plan there. It's like any business, isn't it? You kind of. But it's just good to see him back doing stuff.
For Dave, totally.
He sort of disappeared, you know.
He and I chat fairly often on Facebook.
So do he and I, yeah.
And then also licensing stuff we chatted about a fair bit in the lead up. Even though I'm not an advisor on licenses, he knew that I knew people at the council and could.
Yeah, you must have opened a few doors with this crusade we're going to talk about, right?
Yeah.
Have you learnt a lot along the way?
Oh man, is this recording?
Yeah, we started.
Recording. Well, the thing is that I've had a lot of people in the last few days message me congratulating me on winning this court case, and and I've been kind of quick to say to people, I can't really take credit for something that I didn't do.
Yeah.
I was a small part of the appeals case, helping the council defend their policy.
Yeah.
And when I say small part, very small part, and I was advocating on behalf of people who enjoy electronic music, not venues, not businesses.
Yeah,
I
guess you're very clear that you're not there with some sort of. You're not like a lobbyist for commercial interests.
But I got called lobbyist by various people. And
I'm sure you got called a few things.
You know what I mean? And Nikki Kay asked me which bar group was paying me at one stage when I chatted to her, and but the area where I think was most important was actually the schooling up about between 3 and 5 years ago, and then in the last 3 years getting involved in the actual getting involved in the policy development, and even that was more a case of how do you build meaningful relationships within the council with either councillors, people on the hearings committee, or some of the actual policy people, sitting down with them and saying, can you please consider us? Because
Yeah.
there are all these little side effects that happen when you think closing earlier will address alcohol harm, or introducing a lockout or a one-way door
Yeah.
will somehow make things safer. So I spent, so I think my influence is more in there, just to help encourage the council to just say, hey, look, just be mindful of us.
Yeah.
Because we're not really contributing to the harm, at least not proportionally.
Yeah.
And that means that the council's provisional policy ended up being steered
Yeah.
in that direction. And so it's easier to defend something than it is to appeal something.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
so the hard work was done then.
So
and that was a long process.
Well, explain exactly what you've been up to in terms of what we're talking about, because some people would be like, what are they talking about?
Yeah, totally.
But firstly, I'll introduce you. This is Rob Warner, DJ. What else would you describe you as? See yourself as a campaigner now, as of the last few years?
Yeah, well, and I work for a small public relations company,
Yep.
and I'm really interested in communication theory and mass communication and the psychology of it, and then also politics.
Yeah.
I'm not involved in politics,
No.
but especially looking at European and American politics afar.
Did your PR skills come in handy for this journey?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was the first time I'd been able to really mesh my background in PR
Yeah.
and communication and my DJing, the passion for electronic music,
Yeah.
into one thing,
Yeah.
and be proud of a project.
So you formed this organisation called Dance Till Dawn, I think
Yeah.
it was called.
Yeah.
How many years ago was that? 5 years ago?
About 4 years ago,
Yeah.
It's probably 5 years ago, I actually started talking to David Roper.
Yeah.
And when he was up in Auckland, we had a chat about where it was going and what we were seeing in the newspaper. The police were proposing closing
Yeah.
times, and then Greg and I started chatting. Greg Churchill.
Yeah. And so this organisation, for those who don't know, I've got a number of offshore listeners now,
Yeah,
many expats, is that in line with places like, probably most famously for us, Sydney, certainly the news about Fabric in London there for a while, London in general, other cities you might school me about.
Yeah.
We went from 24-hour licences being available to there being 4 a.m. licences across the board, and then they were proposing even more kind of draconian hours. Is that? Yeah.
That's a good summary. And generally, when I'm talking about stuff, I'm talking about central Auckland.
Yeah.
Because the outer-lying parts.
And so what were they proposing aside from the 4 a.m., which is already in place, that you decided to kind of do something?
The police originally were aiming for sort of 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. closing, blanket, nothing after that.
Wow.
And then when they chose that because of, whatever their reasons, they have lots of reasons. Some of them make sense. Some of them are kind of Donald Trump logic.
Yeah.
And then when they realised that probably was never going to happen, they kind of changed it more to about 2 p.m. to 3 a.m., but
Yeah.
with a 1 a.m. lockout.
Yeah, which
So-
was trialled in Melbourne, I think.
Which was trialled in Melbourne over a 1 month or 2 month period, 4 years in a row, or 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
Which was reported on quite widely in a Ernst and Young report.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of downsides to it. But then the advocates of lockouts said, yeah, but you only trialled it for such a short amount of time, and there were so many details that render the study useless. You can always
So
people can always find.
the advocates are in the Auckland. Let's just stick with the Auckland scenario. You've said first and foremost the police,
Yeah, and healthcare,
and healthcare,
and then lobbying groups like Alcohol Health Watch.
and so they're all worthwhile organisations in terms of what they're trying to. I'm just playing devil's advocate here in terms of what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And God, I can't imagine being a police officer, sectioned onto that roster at that time of the day, and so on and so forth. But I think what you proposed was that basically along the lines of don't tar all of us with the same brush.
Yes, exactly. And I made
And so, how do you set about doing that? So, what we're meaning there is, you were suggesting that if a venue's run correctly and it's got the right door policy and it's not focused on alcohol, that people can be safe all times of the day and night.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And my experiences over 25 years of DJing,
Yeah.
and of Greg's and of Dave Roper's and everyone else we spoke to, were that they always felt a lot safer in electronic music focused venues or events than they did at random house parties or at rock gigs or
Yeah.
things. And it's not to malign different kinds of music, but some venues, some types of music and some types of events have a very greater focus on just getting smashed.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that people don't go out of their way to get drunk in electronic music venues, but it's less for a start.
Yeah.
And when people do, it seems like there's a more friendly atmosphere.
Well,
There's more people looking out for their brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And, it seemed to me that was a better option than what we see with the rise in house parties.
Yeah. And so agreed, but then I was thinking today, there's also an argument that the sort of crowd that a lot of electronic music gigs are attracting now is kind of a bit more of that boozy kind of mainstream element, perhaps inspired by, similar large gigs in the US and so on. So how do you get into this really difficult area of like, how do you define a good crowd and a bad crowd? Did you face any of that? Like,
absolutely.
How do we measure this? It's very
hard
abstract.
It's very hard to measure, and it's very.
And do you agree that there is there's a sort of a different movement now as well?
Oh, I definitely agree, and I made sure that I always talked about it in terms of electronic music culture.
Yeah.
And that was so that I could say, people who are genuinely in this for music reasons will tend to be more music focused,
yeah.
and they're not there to get smashed and harass girls or whatever happens at the events. But I totally accept that.
Yeah.
There are varying levels of that.
It's very hard to quantize, whatever the word is, quantify.
When you get a large event, say for example like a big day out back in the day, or more currently something like Auckland City Limits.
Yeah.
You get the people who are really into the music, and then the people who are like, I want to go because there's a massive gig on. They get dragged by their mates. And nights, anyone who worked in nightclubs in town will tell you, on the nights that those kind of events happened, afterwards when town got flooded with lots of people who ordinarily didn't go to town, the issues were much greater than, and so it gave you that opportunity to point it out, which I did to the council and to the police, that these large events and which aren't to do with the electronic music venues are the ones that flood town with people who are they've drunk a lot more, they don't go out as often, they are randomly looking for venues, so it's not a destination kind of motivation, and those people tend to run into people of different, creeds and walks of life and whatever, and that's when you start having problems with lots of people on the street who have had a few drinks, which is why you have so much problem outside hotspots, like at closing time, like the McDonald's and the Burger Kings.
What do you do with? Because again, you're preaching to the choir, explaining this to me.
Yeah.
But then, in terms of now this has been established as the 4 a.m. is going to stay. That problem still remains, surely. So what do they do? What do they do to stop that kind of madness?
Well, I mean, I saw
it's probably not your.
I saw that my involvement in the alcohol policy to stand up for something that I believed in, and I had quite a few people who helped me with it along the way in varying amounts.
Yeah.
And but I did it from the logic that people who are not causing the problem should not be the primary losers in policy change aiming to achieve something.
Yeah.
And that and from that logic alone, I don't have to account for the other people.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't have to account for the other people, and we don't have to account for the other people. But because there's always a small crossover of 10% or 15%, and the types of people who go to different bars.
I've got a Venn diagram in my head here.
It is responsible for, it would be responsible for the music scene in general and the electronic music scene to build longer-term relationships with the council and the police and hospitality association and say, how can we bring in initiatives that show people that it's not okay to get plastered in a car park, walk into a bar, act the goat, go back out and have a few more drinks in the car park. And your point about the police having to deal with the stuff is totally on point. They have to deal with the worst of the worst. But again, we shouldn't have to account for the massive decline in per capita policing in central Auckland as the population has increased and their resourcing has declined. And that has become a justification for seemingly a justification for their policy direction, because they're clutching at straws. They're losing good staff. And
it's not us, it's this.
So that's actually an argument for properly resourcing the police.
Yeah, you're making me think so many things here. Just this art of not collaboration, I can't think of the word, but you're dealing with so many different stakeholders. You kind of like you've got to sort of look at it from all perspectives. But I think really, when I was looking at, by the way, Rob's the first person that sent me a PDF before a podcast. Thank you. I had to look through. I got to say I skimmed it.
Yeah.
But what you were really doing, it comes back to what you were saying before, is don't effectively punish the innocent with these blanket policies. Is you launched an awareness policy. I had to laugh. Don't literally laugh, but what you had to do was like, this is what a DJ is in the DJ sense. This is what electronic music is. This is, it's a very, and I've always known this, but it really drove home to me just how basic you've got to spell things out, because a number of these people would just have no cultural reference, would they?
Yeah. And getting involved, and the thing I sent you was actually my written evidence for the court case, for the Commission of Inquiry. And the tricky thing is that you explain it to an extent, but if you explain it too much, you run the risk of the authority, the judge, and the two authority members going, "Do you think we're stupid?" So there's kind of a fine line, and so I tried to. I'm a night owl, so I do all my writing at night, and all my editing and sending in the daytime. So I do it at night, and at night time you start typing stuff, and you've written 17 paragraphs, and your mind's racing, and you like criticizing people and stuff. And the next morning you come back,
you got to sleep on.
I just get the red highlighter out in the computer and just highlight all the stuff that I've got to remove or say it without being critical.
And so what happened? What was the court case? What was effectively council versus what was it?
The evidence, the first main bit of evidence got put in November. Then the hearing took place kind of February, March, up to a little bit of April even. So it was 2 weeks, then a week off, then 2 weeks, and then so it was the longest alcohol regulatory licensing authority inquiry ever.
Right. Yep.
Ever, it's the longest one. So I think there was just over 4 weeks of hearing dates. A lot of it was dominated by supermarkets, as they have the resources to keep people on the stand for days and days on end. And then
that was going to be my next question.
So the respondent was the council.
Yeah.
The appellants were the police.
Yeah.
Foodstuffs, Progressive Enterprises, the Medical Officer of Health, and then a few other smaller groups like Alcohol Health Watch, Takapuna Residents Association, a couple of small, I think a brothel group, Redwood Corporation, who have the Pelican Club or something.
Everyone's trying to get their own clauses or something. Why would the Pelican Club and Takapuna Residents...
Because the Takapuna Residents Association was saying, in Takapuna, we don't want 3am licensing.
Yeah.
And because generally there's 1am licensing, but once a month a bar there gets a 3am extension, extension to 3am. And they said those nights, in their eyes, are particularly bad. Therefore, allowing that part of Auckland to have 3am closing all the time would just exacerbate the issues. And I don't know enough about their case specifically, because it's always a mixture of anecdotes and stats. And then stats in themselves get broken down into very conveniently cherry-picked stats. And then broader stats. And then long-term stats, and then snapshot stats. So it's very hard. But so all these different groups had different ideas. Supermarkets.
So everyone's effectively coming at this overall scenario that has to be considered by a judge and staking their claim. I want this. I want it to be longer. I want it to be shorter. I want it to be da-da-da. So the Pelican Club would be like, I want some John to be able to have a beer at 8:30 after these...
I think their one was more about because they're just outside the city fringe, and they were saying it's unfair that we're just outside it, and we're going to have less time than someone who's 200 metres away inside the fringe.
Goodness.
So why can't you move the boundary out? Or why can't we have the same as them? Because for them it's a competitive marketplace disadvantage.
And so what have we ended up with? 4am in the city, and what is it the rest of Auckland?
The rest of Auckland will have a maximum time of 3am.
So that's around here.
And that's for bars. That's for bars. Now, that's maximum. That doesn't mean you can get it. If an area typically generally had one currently, like, say, if you're in, say, Panmure or St. Luke's or somewhere, it had 1am. It doesn't mean that all those bars suddenly have 3am. It means there is the ability to apply when you get a licence.
That's right. And then they consider what's occurred in and around your venue over that period of time.
Absolutely. And also society, within a couple of kilometres, how many other venues there are, whether there are schools or churches or what they call them sensitive sites nearby.
Right. And so how many days were you in court of the whole case?
I was probably there for about half of the case.
So you're taking time off work?
All the time,
Right.
So I've taken...
You got your own business, so you're actually taking time off to...
Yeah.
And so your work supported you in doing that?
Yeah, they support. I didn't get paid.
You didn't get paid, okay.
Okay, put it this way.
Yeah.
I've taken a lot of time off work, but,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, but it's the time off work was, for the hearing, was the least of it. It's the 2 years of 2 to 3 hours of reading 5 nights a week.
Yeah.
For 3 years.
Yeah.
So I've read a couple of hundred academic studies.
Yes. Yeah,
I've written letters. I've called alcohol harm experts and criminologists. I've called them academics. I've found them all over the world, and I've called them, had long chats to them. Letters to the council. Trying to get organisations like APRA involved.
Yeah.
Because in Australia, APRA was heavily involved.
Yeah.
In the Keep Sydney Open stuff.
As it should be. It's,
yes.
it's arts and culture.
Exactly.
You know?
So, the hearing time, for me it was time off work, but, you get to sit there and it's in a perverse kind of side issue thing. It's one of those rare situations in life that a layperson can have their Denny Crane moment.
What do you mean there?
Well, you can. Yeah, it's like, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a barrister.
No.
I can actually be involved in a court case. I can stand up and ask questions.
And so, how long were you on the stand, or how long did you get to present?
Okay. Well, I'm a party to the case.
Yeah.
So, in a very, very weird thing, I was a party to the case. What's called an interested party. You apply to. So, I'm not an appellant or respondent. I'm a party which is supporting the respondent.
Yeah.
But as Rob Warner, I'm also an evidence giver.
Yeah.
So I'm both, and you can't cross-examine yourself.
Yeah.
So in that instance, I asked the authority whether I could read out a summary statement instead, and then invite people to cross-examine me if they wish to. So
And so all that study and research and talking to leading academics paid off when you were cross-examined?
Well, the interesting thing is, the parties who were going to cross-examine me chatted to me.
Before I go, did you feel like at some points, Dance Till Dawn, some people were like, "Who's this flaky hippie?" To some people, it's like, "What?"
No, not at all. Very early on in the piece, once the policy started getting bounced around, I realised that suited me perfectly.
What?
So for people to underestimate the amount of effort we had put in, or the kind of questions I could answer.
So people did underestimate you. That's really interesting.
Well, I don't know if they did, but a couple of times they did. I think the police may have once or twice, a few of the other groups, but not in a major way. But just maybe. In terms of explaining how things work. And I'm like, when you go, oh, look, just assume I've read those studies because I have. Yeah. And it's obvious you haven't.
Yeah.
And then, you don't want to, you're trying to attract people to your position.
Yeah.
You can't force people to agree with you.
Yeah.
So I tried to take the approach that let's kind of attract people to your position, build bridges. I contacted the police multiple times in Wellington to speak to senior strategy people. Generally, they weren't interested in listening or even talking.
So they weren't cooperative now?
No, but on the odd occasion they were.
Yeah.
And then a few times when I chatted to them, it was quickly apparent they were just trying to suss what I was about out. And then I did that with other people, and I found it quite productive. And I would always chat to these guys when I saw them. And
I still get it. Yeah, like a few times you sort of alluded to that. It's like money's the big thing that drives our society these days, right? And so to a few people that would have been a head scratcher. It's like, what's motivating this guy?
Yeah, well,
because there's no dollar bill. There's no,
exactly.
And
there's nothing. Not actually. I mean, the thing is, because I'm not in the twilight of my DJing career, but I've been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
I don't do a lot of late gigs.
No, neither.
And I don't even go out to a forum that often.
No, neither.
But I do not want to have that right taken away from me, or for all the young guys.
It's always a libertarian thing as well, whether it's music or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's also the the one that I always bring up because it's totally hypocritical is the fact that pretty much all these cities we're talking about, you can still go and lose every dime you've got in a casino 24/7. 365.
More than a few times I brought the casino up in the discussions with the council.
Were they
or the police.
there? They're such a powerful organisation.
The casino were, but they were just supporting the council effectively.
Yeah.
But, and I'd said, the casino is effectively the least ethical legal business in existence.
Yeah.
And the casino has a blanket exemption from any changes to alcohol changes laws.
That's powerful lobbying, right?
Exactly. And people, I had so many people just post stuff on the Dance Till Dawn, page saying, bloody national and blah blah blah. And I'd keep pointing out to people, it was Helen Clark in 2003 did it. It wasn't John Key. It wasn't Helen Clark gave them this exemption.
That's amazing. I guess.
Well, sorry, I
wasn't around in New Zealand then, but I would have to guess it must have been like. The amount of money that was going to be generated must have just been too much of a lure. I don't know. Yeah.
I think it was more of a difficulty thing as well because casinos, it says, I'm paraphrasing, it says that while the gaming room is legally allowed to be open, they can sell alcohol.
Yeah.
So, and it was because it was kind of like it's going to be so hard to shut the bar areas in such a massive room that you can get 2,000 people in.
Yeah.
But then people always undermine their own arguments by saying we need it for the tourists and stuff. I'm like, do the tourists really need to be drinking?
Well, you know
like
the
fish
other,
at
you know,
4
you
a.m.?
know,
They can go to a hotel
you
room.
know the other great unsaid. Of course, the casinos want liquor available all the time because
keeps people there.
Well, it also it makes people who are up money wise suddenly
Absolutely
lose everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there are all the other hypocrisies of it too. That people say, oh, yeah, we want Auckland to be the city for tourists who come here on the passenger ships and stuff like that, and blah blah. And you're like, you can get alcohol in the hotel room any 24/7.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
In the casino, 24/7 as long as they're open.
Yeah.
And then they turn around and say, oh, nightclubs are going to attract criminals. And you're
Yeah.
like, I don't think
Whereas
so.
casinos are sort of almost organised crime in a way.
Well, yeah, I mean, and people have made that argument many times before. I mean, I try as much as I can to never give them a cent of my money.
Yeah.
But I do have some friends who are prolific gamblers. I wouldn't call them degenerates because they usually win.
Yeah.
But I go up and watch them sometimes, and it just amazes me how many people are in the casino. You go in there on a Friday night, and you're like, there's like 1,000 people in there, and you could walk along and count every 10th person. It looks like they've been there too long.
Yeah.
Is possibly intoxicated or borderline. It's amazing. It's horrible.
Host responsibility is a total myth
Yeah.
in those places.
Yeah, totally.
So, still talking about the dollar. How did you fund all of this? Did you have to seek lawyers? Were you paying huge money for people to help your case, or
No.
did you do a fund me or a pledge me or anything?
No, I didn't. And early on, with another DJ, Tom McGuinness, who now lives in London, who promotes the Anno Domini gigs at the Art Gallery and like really, really cool gigs. He was the young guy I got involved.
Theo, yeah.
So he and I talked about going and asking people for money or doing fundraising, and it looked like doing it on a small scale by asking DJs to give money, for example, was going to be tricky. Because you line yourself up to get $100.
Most of them are skint anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And then going to bars, then you immediately get accused of being, you're in their pocket.
Whose pocket?
The bar's pocket. You were just advocating on behalf of bars.
Yeah.
So I basically said I will not take money from bars.
Yeah.
I'll not take money from any alcohol companies.
Yeah.
And then eventually you work out that it's like, this is out of my pocket. So we did get, when I needed to print off our submissions to the council, a friend of mine just printed them all off in his office, 30 copies, 40 pages each, and colour bound, So stuff like that we got. Everything else was out of pocket, everything.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
I at some stages I sold parts of my record collection.
Wow, really?
But stuff that I can live without, or I've got double ups of.
So you're really the passion, man. That's amazing. So it's what a ride. So look, I'm really glad that it would have been terrible if it had gone a different direction for you.
And just if I can just go back to
say whatever you want.
A point you made earlier about why did I do it? One of the big things was Greg and I had chatted early on, saying that we really, really, really relished being able to go clubbing when we were young and 20.
Yeah.
And when the consultation path was laid out, and they say it's a public consultation, anyone can get involved. When they say anyone, they mean anyone capable.
Yeah.
And people who've got money or business skills or life skills have much, much better opportunity to get involved than a 20-year-old who might not have as much. So Greg and I were originally kind of motivated along those grounds. It's like, protect this really, really cool thing for young people who want to get into the scene. And, I think a lot of people who are DJs...
How old are you now, Rob? Can I ask?
43.
Okay.
Probably, I don't know. I always say I'm older than I look, but now I do probably look 43. So it was kind of like, hey, let's protect something that did so well for us.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it. And when you're saying about we got the money to do this project, you go, well, why didn't we rope in lots of the young guys? But the thing is, it's quite hard to herd sheep. And everyone we spoke to, or I spoke to, were keen, enthusiastic. People were always like, "We'll help you, whatever you want." But whenever you asked, you hardly got a reply, or you did 2 weeks later, or I needed in such short notice that it would be a Facebook chat at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
So I got used to just going, I'll ask for help, and I'll just do as much of it as I can.
And then I'll just go ahead and do it myself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I mean, some people were a lot of help with just
Yeah.
I mean, I did have the opportunity to speak to a couple of lawyers and just say, look, I just want to do this. Is there any downsides to this or upsides?
There's many lawyers that are old ravers, mate. You find those around.
I have found some people old ravers, even people at the Ministry of Justice.
One of the greatest. Greatest. That's like Muhammad Ali kind of a statement, but a very highly regarded criminal lawyer in Wellington. Now, started Naked Angel, which is that sort of original, quite seminal underground club in Wellington. Great mind. Shout outs to Paul. Mr. Paul Knowsley.
Yeah. And I would run into quite a few people, including after the case, at the record fair at the museum, which they were doing in the museum. I ran into this guy out of context, and he came up to me and said hi, and then I didn't recognise him out of his suit, and he works for the Ministry of Justice. So he was one of the people running the case, and he was there buying drum and bass 12s.
Awesome.
And we were chatting about something, he's like, he goes, I wanted to chat to you during the case, and I was like, wow, man, good guy. He was just like, he goes, I totally, and I was like, oh, cool, give me some insiders, and he's like, I cannot.
It's like, I mean, this is a huge generalisation. All the people in Clubland all over the world, but I have met some very, very brilliant people who, enduring friendships and so on from as you say, my days when I actually was out in those hours. Seems to attract some smart people. So some funny things that happened during the case, or anything that you were like, well, that's quite left of centre, or anything where you went, I can't believe that just happened, or I can't believe they're saying that. That's blatantly wrong. You're not gagged. You can't. I mean, this is a public case, isn't it?
Well, actually, during the case, I mean, it got reported in the newspaper in May, just at the beginning of the case, that the police had solicited evidence from a gentleman who was a naval rating who king hit someone down by McDonald's.
This is where the big publicity around the beginning of all of this.
And the beginning of the case, but we'd all had that written evidence since November in the big bundle of evidence. And the day it came in, because I'm thinking about it from a PR point of view, the day that evidence landed, in the bundle with like 20 other bits, I was like, this is a clanger of epic proportions, because no matter what he says, he's not an expert.
Yeah.
And all it will do is get to the media and be made to look really bad for the police, because it's not so much it reflects it, because it's not their views.
So who did they call? Not the guy that committed the crime. He'd be in jail. They called him.
No, they're correct. Yeah, because he's long out of jail.
What do they hope to get from him?
Because
I hit someone because I was drunk. Shut the bars early.
Correct. You've summarised this whole. No, in fact, it was worse than that. He said, if the bars had been closed earlier, I would not have been out. I would not have been drunk. That guy would still be alive.
Oh, fuck
and,
him.
and this
I'm
is
sorry,
despicable. It's totally despicable.
That's what?
And I actually said this to the guys. I was like, that was a clanger. And so at the beginning of the case, on virtually the first few days, they said, the police said, because anyone who gives evidence can be cross-examined or questioned by any other party.
Yeah.
So on the first day, they said, look, for the sake of just sensitivity for the family of Taran Asthana who passed away, who was well known in the club scene.
Yes, I saw that.
Could we please, could everyone agree to not cross-examine this guy? And everyone was like, cool. And I thought, to me, it wasn't so much what the evidence said or didn't say, but that someone in the strategy department of the police sat there and thought that it would be a good idea to get this evidence. I mean, you just got to think
good Navy boy.
You got to think of the utter lack of foresight to think of how this would be made to look in the media.
Yeah. And did the media just jump on it?
Front page of the Sunday Star Times. Just total clanger. And then, the Monday morning after that, the police, who I spoke to just in the hallway, and that they were livid about it. But I said to one of them, I said, this is an own goal. Don't blame anyone else,
Yeah. Well, see, there's so many different angles to this. It keeps opening up different thoughts to me. But I got to say that I feel there's an element of not maybe that specific instance of what happened with him, but in all of this, we're dealing with bigger kind of societal stuff, I guess. Is this this sort of mainstream attitude that something like the Navy or the police or all of these sort of organisations are all good stand-up organisations and people and rule-bound and da-da-da-da, and the dance scene's kind of weird, and there's drugs and there's this and it's late and da-da-da-da-da. But when I came back here, I had pretty crappy hospo work I was doing part-time through an agent, wonder where this is going. I'll get to my point. I ended up doing a few bar shifts at the Naval Bar in Devonport. And there were a few times during the night, me as just a lackey who was working there was going, I don't feel comfortable continuing to serve this alcohol. So it's interesting, you know. I guess the punchline of that is what wider society sees as acceptable and not acceptable. I think there's all this stuff there as well that gets really murky, and people are unfairly tarred with different brushes and so on, you know.
And that's why, I mean, I've been in touch with Merrick Milan, who's the Amsterdam Nightmare.
Ooh.
So they have a nightmare, effectively, and then they've got a night czar in
It's a
London.
legitimate position, like he's not just decided he's the nightmare, like the wizard in Christchurch.
Position, yeah.
Okay.
Legitimate position. So you know, London is starting to do it, and Berlin definitely does it, and Amsterdam. Societies that recognise the cultural value of a vibrant nightlife scene, and you're better off making it safer.
We're so far off that.
Yeah.
You think about those cities you just mentioned and how they're known. I think Wellington would have a nightmare before.
Yeah,
a nightmare. It's not a very good name, is it? A nightmare.
So in London, they call it a night czar.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
I think Wellington will get a night czar before Auckland does.
Yeah.
So what do they do? They're working. They're agitating for the night during the day, or are they actually they're
doing it at night and day.
Well?
But it's so that there's a permanent conduit between the nightlife for any concerns they may have, and then also police. If the police notice that there's certain kinds of crime happening, how could clubs be involved in initiatives to reduce it? Or if a bad batch of drugs was going around or something, which they have drug testing in the UK now, and it's going to be in New Zealand as well. The New Zealand Drug Foundation, really, really good initiative. They bought one of these devices that can test drugs at festivals. Yeah. In Australia, someone said, we're going to do the same thing. And the police said, if you do that, we'll show up, we'll stand there and arrest everyone who comes. I'm
sure you come across this one. It's a pretty famous case. There's the young girl, I think it was at the Sydney Big Day Out, and they had drug dogs. And so she panicked and ate everything before she got in. Oh. And that's one of the known kind of ecstasy fatalities. But she panicked. She didn't want to get arrested. She didn't want, it's just a young girl.
Yeah.
Look it up after. I'm surprised you haven't heard of it. I was going to ask about that too, as in terms of unfair sort of prejudice, or maybe someone on the other side wanting to try and frame things a certain way. People like to alter their consciousness. There's drugs at rock festivals. There's drugs at sports games in the audience. There's drugs in nightclub life. There's drugs.
And there's alcohol everywhere.
But did someone try and play that cheap card on you?
Well, actually, some people were kind of like, why are you doing this? And then they'd say, what do you do? And then it seems so weird that I would have to start half of my conversation saying, just so you know, I've never taken drugs in my life. I've never even held a cigarette. I've never had a Red Bull. Yeah. I said, but I have had lots of Heinekens, and I've definitely had lots of vodkas. But
you're really confusing them now.
I said don't. Said I'm not here, doing it from a point of view. I want to take pingers and get off my rocker all the time. But having seen it from the DJ booth, which is like this interesting position, this kind of
we know a lot about human psychology, and we often have a good view of
very good view of it, because you're kind of the sober person conducting the party, and it's kind of like you're curating the music, as much as I hate that word, and you're
bunging it together,
and then you're kind of trying. It's like psychology. You're trying to control adults. Yeah, to bring them to elation and
So
keep them
I got you off your point. It was back to the drug thing.
So I have seen firsthand. Many of my friends, if not most of them from clubbing, I've seen them take drugs and the effects of how it changes them. So I'm not an expert on drugs per se, but I have seen that these people are out partying. That it is vastly safer than the kind of drinking I've seen when I've been asked to DJ at house parties.
Someone who isn't me. Was witness to the very good ecstasy around in the late 90s, and it seemed to be like I don't see how there could have been any trouble in some of those rooms,
Totally. I mean, I used to DJ at places where I guess at events and stuff when ecstasy was really ramping up.
Don't get me started on prohibition. The other problem there is all these young kids are going out and taking horrible derivative versions of things that make you not be the way the real things make you.
And I just see this thing about this synthetic cannabis that they've had these deaths, I think.
Russell Brown.
Crazy.
You ever look at Russell Brown's blog?
Standard? What's it called? No. Public Address.
Public Address.
Yes.
I don't know if you know, he's very, very big into writing about drug policy. Has been the last few years. Mm-hmm. So he's actually another thing you might want to look at afterwards. He posted a wee rant about that yesterday or the day before. Apparently, it's just some random plant matter sprayed with something that's been killing a bunch of people in the States.
Oh,
Crazy. Have a look afterward.
things that have been killing people in the States. That's a pretty broad thing.
No, it is.
It's like policemen, racism.
This is a
Donald Trump.
podcast. I just say what I want. It's my no. Not OxyContin. It's definitely an opioid. It's definitely an opioid, and it's a liquid version. This is what they suspect at the States. This is what that batch is in New Zealand.
So this stuff's
and so it's regular plant matter spray. Sorry,
this stuff's illegal in New Zealand. You can buy in the shop.
Synthetics are illegal, but what has happened is suddenly I'm trying putting myself on the spot as the drug trade expert, but my understanding is that because crystal meth is so lucrative now, you don't get the widespread cannabis growing like you would have even 10 years ago. Cannabis is a lot easier to spot. It's smellier. So the punchline I'm getting to is a lot of the gangs and so on are selling meth and not worrying about pot.
Okay.
So my friends who enjoy a smoke have said that cannabis is in short supply at the moment.
Oh, okay.
So I think so. This is a way of explaining why would you smoke this horrible derivative version. I think it's because there's a nationwide shortage and it's related to crystal meth.
I have, as I said, I have very little kind of knowledge of drug use.
But what I'm saying is makes sense.
Other than seeing the difference between people dancing on it or off it on a dance floor.
And so, why is that? Just never appealed to you because you say you do drink?
No. I think it was because I got into DJing for what I call the organic reasons. It wasn't what these young guys get into it now for. I got into it because I was just a quiet geeky guy, a quiet shy guy, and it was kind of a way you could get involved in parties where you could compile the tapes by pressing pause and making these little compilations. And then I went to a dance party and was like amazed. I was like, the music didn't end, and then you eventually kind of get involved and find out how it's done, and suddenly I'm playing KLF records and
looking at when you started 1993. I got to say I think I bought my first 1200 in 1994 or 5, so we weren't far off. You're a couple of years older than me, but it sounds like there's very similar experiences, Rob. You probably went to other kinds of gigs and stuff at school. Dance culture it had been around here a while, but I think it really started to pop its head up around then. And I, like you, went to a rave and probably drank Coca-Cola all night and danced till 7.
Oh, I was scared to get drunk when I was young. I mean, I got into that was when I started DJing 93. I'd been into electronic music for a few years. So I had a typical older brother thing. I had an older brother, so I grew up in the 80s. So I was into what every older brother's into. Well, actually, it was more like
no, you got more black sounds.
More like Def Leppard. More like Def Leppard, White Snake, Jesus Jones, kind of stuff now you look back and you kind of laugh at. Even though Def Leppard's cool as. I love Def Leppard.
I went and saw I got given free tickets to that show here 2008 or 9, and the whole of Vector was just chocker.
Oh, man.
And then they started playing, it was a free ticket, and so what I'm getting at is I didn't go as a diehard fan, but when they started playing I was like, man.
And you forget how many good songs.
That's right.
You forget how many good songs some of those bands have.
Just great pop music.
Yeah.
But this whole Vector was just rammed 20 years later.
Oh, I love
leather
that.
pants, lots of kind of sexual moves with the guitar. Just a bunch of old dudes who've still got it.
So and then at some stage, my brother suddenly he was buying 10 City records and stuff on FFRR from the UK.
So did he have a cool guy at a record shop who? How did he discover all of that?
I do not know.
NME?
Do not know. And then once 10 City comes along, and then you're listening to Steve Silk Hurley and E Smooth remixes, which went into CeCe Peniston and New York House. Yeah. Then I'm hooked on house, and then I moved to Japan for about 15 months in 2003.
Wow.
Where I really discovered.
Where, Tokyo? Osaka?
No, I was on Fukoku. Sorry, not Fukoku. Shikoku for the first 9 months, and then I spent about 6 months in a town called Kure, which is next to Hiroshima. Yeah. So
what a wild country that is.
I went clubbing and was like, what's this music? There'd be the second room at a nightclub.
Yeah.
Second room, and it'd just be like this real slower, dubbier music with singing in it, and that turned out to be New York house.
And I looked at some of the stuff. I quickly had a glance at some of the stuff you're into, and we have very similar tastes when it comes to house and tech. Like you say, kind of dubbier. Stuff like I saw you into like Peace Frog. I saw that you'd done a remix of the Salida tune I used to play. That
Be Yourself.
It used to freak people out a little in Wellington because it was too kind of diva-y and deep, and like a lot of back then. I don't know about Auckland, but vocals used to be equated with cheese very unfairly. But that show, I love all that.
In Wellington, or
probably not so much now. Like Wellington does vocal house, and Wellington doth not have a huge history together.
Because Wellington was really into its noodles, wasn't it?
What's noodles?
You know, like kind of generic deep house.
Okay.
No, I was just
Okay.
making a joke about
So
Andy
you-
and Shmoo and those
yeah.
guys. No, they love that.
Stuff like, I saw you post that Sneak had come through 20 years ago. I mean, that was a
Yeah.
huge show, Sneak and Doc Martin.
Yep.
That gig in Wellington was Sneak and Doc Martin in one room. How's this? 90s, Sneak and Doc Martin in one room, Basement Jacks in the other.
Yeah. See, in Auckland, they played in the power station.
Noodles.
But then they went over and played in the community hall across the road.
Doc Martin as well?
Yeah, in the kitchen, and they put the decks basically over where the hob was, and they were playing in the kitchen. But
Yeah.
but see, that's interesting. You're talking about Wellington.
And so the last one I was going to
Tribal.
geek out together is the label Tribal that I really got into as well. That again, back 94, 95 when I was first starting was. Well, it didn't quite fit Welly's sound at the time, but I love all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, if Greg Churchill was there, he'd be going, "Oh, you've opened the can of worms with Rob now." Because I collect tribal recordings.
Oh, do you?
Record, yeah. So I've got every record.
Funny you say that. I regret getting rid of a bunch of them back
Yeah.
then. Yeah.
I've got every record they've made, and I've got about 6 or 7 which they never released, the test pressings. So,
Oh, boy.
So also, I love
Okay.
that label, and that label I regard as being the greatest label of the '90s for house music.
Yeah.
Strictly Rhythm people know more.
Yeah.
Because it put a lot more records out. They were putting out 2 or 3 records a month.
But Tribal had funnily enough, this is such a dorky comment, Tribal had a kind of more tribal...
Well, exactly.
A bit of a darker sound.
Tribal
than,
was also
yeah.
was what they would call like a fierce label. So it had like the handbag and
He's
diva,
off, folks.
the diva. They had like the handbag diva
Yeah,
element, and then the real strong connection with the New York gay scene.
Yeah.
And
Oh, totally.
huge connection
That
with
Salida
Junior
tune,
Vasquez and all that Salida and stuff. But then it had like all of the kooky, quirky European stuff that was really dark and
What, did
acidy.
Tribal, the label?
Tribal did,
Yeah,
yeah. So that was a really good, diverse label, and some of the greatest artists of the last 25 years, had their first records in that label, like Junior Vasquez.
What
Danny
happened to it?
Tenaglia.
What happened to it?
Well, in about 96, I think their deal ended with their distributor, or they had some dispute. So the guy who ran the label, Rob DiStefano, folded it.
Yeah.
And then relaunched it as Twisted Records.
Yeah.
Which was.
Have you been to a Tenaglia show?
Oh, yeah, a couple.
I
yeah.
have. I did it at home in London in 2000. It was one of the most
amazing.
stunning nights I've ever had.
Yeah.
He was just amazing. Just amazing.
He's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. I saw him when he played in Auckland in '98, January '98,
Yeah.
and then
Listen to us.
I've seen him in Singapore at Zouk, which is
I've
basically
been to Zouk.
which is the greatest sound system in the night.
I went to Zouk on the way to. Well, no, I went and did the Red Bull Academy in 2000.
Yeah.
And so the tickets, we stopped in Singapore, and someone, funnily enough, a bunch of DJs going to a DJ Academy in Dublin. Someone had a hookup for a guy who was part of Zouk, and he showed us through and stuff. We had a night there. Amazing place.
Amazing sound system. Steve Dash.
Now, last geeky question I want to ask you about Tribal Records, because you might be able to help me out here with something that's bothered me.
I feel bad if I don't know it.
Is I'm sure I had, because back in those days, starting out, compilations were great because they just, obvious reasons, provide a lot of options, get your ears into what I like, what I don't like. I'm sure I had a Tribal compilation on vinyl, but I don't know where it's gone. Did they do a comp back then on vinyl?
Well, they did. Most of the comps they did on CD, they do a vinyl double pack.
Okay, I must
so
have
that
one
so
of
the,
those.
the
So
one that
it's
you're
not one
probably talking
particularly
about,
seminal one. 93,
was
94,
called,
95?
that was called The Sound of Tribal UK, mixed by Junior Vasquez.
It was.
And the double pack vinyl, that was on Tribal UK, the sub label,
yeah.
and that had Matt Wood, What Am I Going to Do? It had Junior Vasquez, Get Your Hands Off My Man. It had Liquid
your
City,
hands.
Feeling Free, Danny
Yeah.
Tenaglia, Bottom Heavy.
Well, what happened to it? It's gone.
Yeah,
So you got thousands of records.
yeah, a lot. Yeah, I mean, I've got.
You don't still- do you still
I've
buy
probably
now?
I've probably got 2 feet of Tribal records alone.
Right. You still buy stuff now?
I do buy the odd thing,
Yeah.
and usually I've got a want list on my Discogs account,
Yeah.
and so I have a want list, and every so often I'll just do a quick black through and see if anyone's put one up, and I'll buy one. I bought something a few weeks ago, something I've been after for years, and I'll buy stuff that's never come out digitally.
You pay through the nose when you need to?
Generally not. No.
No.
Yeah, I'll get stuff if it's like $5 plus
Yeah,
postage. You know,
yeah.
See, even though I enjoy vinyl and I'll happily play it, I'm not hooked to it totally.
Yeah.
So over the years, I had a turntable and a mixing desk and a computer next to my where I worked.
Yeah.
So I would have a stack of records and I would record off the B-sides and stuff that I loved. I'd go and search for them first, see if they're available in digital stores
Yeah.
or the appropriate Russian blog. and then record them off. So basically, most of my record collection of stuff that has never been released digitally, I have it digitized and declicked and mastered.
I'm not a snob either. I will happily go play good sounding MP3s, but I still love using the Serato vinyl because that's what I'm used to doing hands-wise. But I got to say, I was like, this is a game changer once. I can't believe I just said game changer. It's a terrible expression. But I was playing a bit at Britomart Country Club quite a few years ago now, and I got into the just take the USB key for the CD player with a pair of headphones.
Yep.
And I walked in, and I was almost like, I'm cheating.
No,
I'm cheating
agree, totally.
because my back's not half put out. And look, with you, it's like it worked. It sounded great, amazing.
Yeah.
You know?
And there was an earlier version of that when CDJs first got good.
Yeah.
And people started changing CDJs, I would take a CD wallet, which got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But I could not go to a gig without still taking vinyl.
Yeah.
But the amount of vinyl got less and less and less.
Yeah.
And it got to the stage where in the last couple of years of that era, when I was traveling, because I used to travel up to Asia a couple of times a year and do events.
Yeah.
Do them around Singapore, Cambodia, China, just
wow.
I would still take like 6 records with me. So it'd be like just this token thing, and they'd pretty much never get played. But it was just like I could not bring myself to go to an event. And then the CD wallet, and when
airplanes travels when it gets the best, right?
Yeah.
When I've done stuff like pretend that the bag I'm carrying is not 50 kilos, so that I don't have to pay the.
Oh, I had lots of ways to get around that. I'd basically go up there, and when you got near the front of the queue, I'd put my carry-on record bag just on the floor, and I'd just kick it along the floor.
I've done that too.
Kick it along the floor. And then when you're at the counter, sometimes they'd be like, oh, is there a bag down there? And you'd say yes, but sometimes they wouldn't even notice it. No. You'd just be like, no.
No, as I say, I've pretended it's got like socks in it or something, and then finally, and I remember once I got all the way through, because once you're at the customs screening, I've learnt this. They can't really do anything. They don't really, how they say, even with just travelling locally, nothing to do with records, they'll be like, if it's over 7 kilos, we'll charge, They just can't. You're too far into the system. It sends everything. So once this guy realised that this bag, he lifted up, and there was this the customs guy, just this look of shock on his face. He almost went white, and he goes, he goes, mate, if that falls out of the overhead, that's going to kill someone. Yeah. And then he sort of looked around, he goes, I can't do anything, but that's going to kill someone, and then send it through. So.
I actually, same with you. I've always done it and taken the gamble. I have never once had it taken off me. But once when I was on a plane leaving Auckland to go up to Asia and Singapore Airlines, the guy, I got down to the, when people like me get the cheap seats, you're always in the last section of the plane. The guy grabbed it and he said, "Oh, I'll just." So I'd put it up there, and he went to move it along to make space. And he went, and it only had about 60, 70 records, and he moved along. And he said, "We can't have that up there." And I was like, "Why?" And I said, "I'll put it under my seat." And he goes, "No, you can't do that." And he said, "Oh, He said, we can't have it up there because, if there's turbulence, the things will pop open and they'll fall out. Yeah. And I said, actually, I just watched the YouTube video the other month where they got a 767 decommissioned one, and they put lots of cameras in it and stuff in the overhead compartments, and they crashed it into the desert.
You said all of
Discovery
this?
Channel. Discovery Channel. And I said, I watched it. And one thing they noticed?
What?
Not a single overhead compartment opened, yet all the seats were flying everywhere. And I said, so that's the last thing that's... And the guy was like, oh... And
I'm getting this feeling that I don't think you ever question Rob when he's... he's going to have his his I's dotted and his T's crossed.
Yeah, well, exactly. I think, when you're involved with
if I was quick thinking sense of humour with him, I would have said, sir, YouTube is not a reputable source. YouTube is not a reputable academic source.
No, sometimes you don't need to have a compelling point. You need to delay them long enough that the embarrassment of them holding up other passengers is greater than them teaching you a lesson.
Yeah. And so the punchline of this story is, I'm glad my record bag never killed anyone.
Correct. Absolutely. and I'm glad that even now, if I have to take a big CD wallet, I'm like, man, that's heavy. And then I go, no, records were heavy.
Before we lose anyone who's not some way, shape or form knows about dance or DJing, I will say Greg burns each single tune to a full-length CD. He believes that's the quality way to burn them. So there you go.
I've been harassing him about that for years.
Why? You think it's silly logic?
Yes. Because it wasn't about the quality on the CD. I think for him it was about when you're looking through your CD wallet, it's more like looking through individual records.
No, that's right. That is the reason. That is the reason.
And
that's right. And that's what I struggled with the USB key thing, was that little display was a bit of a head scratcher. Yeah. Anyway.
I just came up with a system of putting crosses after tunes. So
Okay,
if it had 3 crosses, it was like a must-have. 2
Yeah.
was net, and then 1 was... So it was kind of a hierarchy system.
So I think the good old Rock Shop gave Greg an endorsement for Tractor, so he's no doubt playing around on that now as well.
Okay.
Shouts to Leon. So how did you get yourself around Asia? Did you organise those shows? Was it you managing yourself, or did you have an agent?
I started with actually doing launch events for 42 Below Vodka
Yeah.
in Asia, and that was in about 2000 and late 2003.
Yeah.
And so we did the big launch for a venue in Bangkok called Sirocco,
Yeah.
which was an outdoor venue on the 67th floor of a building.
Wow.
At that time, it was the highest outdoor restaurant in the world,
Yeah.
and so I did the indoor part. And so that was
You were working for 42 Below,
So I was going up and doing launch events and stuff with them, but then some of
but
these...
not just DJing, like actually helping put on the event. Is that what you mean?
I would help organise some or find venues, but generally it was more DJing at the events. It would kind of be their way of saying to someone, hey, we're going to do this launch event.
Yeah.
If you fly this guy up, we'll put him in the hotel, we'll get him, and it'll be like this cool little New Zealand connection, and we'll have a few other things. The venues that I DJed at, I think I did a fairly good job of... reconnoitring the venues that we'd do stuff at, so I knew that I would fit with them musically. So the kind of events I was doing were kind of in that Dimitri from Paris Masters at Work kind of vibe.
Yeah.
So they were conducive with, older people, cocktail events.
Sitting down, standing up, dancing.
As opposed to being raves. So then we started doing some silent discos, which we did in Singapore on a rooftop, and then we did one...
Give everyone headphones?
You give everyone headphones.
And they choose between you or another DJ?
Another DJ, a local DJ, yeah. And then
Do you know the numbers? Because it's like, oh no, 60 people are listening
it's a
to him.
competition. No. And then we did that in Malaysia as well, and then that was 2 nights in a row outside a large mall called Pavilion Mall. But on the second night we did that, we were...
a bar outside a mall? Or
no,
just,
they built an enclosure which had maybe a 1.5 metre high fence.
What was it, a club, a bar?
Just a big outdoor area out in the forecourt of a mall.
Right.
And they did it in the evening, so you could probably get 300 people.
Who did a promoter just put on
42
stuff in a
Below.
random space? 42 Below.
Yes, or Bacardi Martini, who were the Malaysian agents. And then the Ministry of Culture showed up and said if I didn't stop DJing, we'd get arrested because... the Ministry of Culture in Malaysia, they are very conservative Muslims who get themselves into positions of influence, of cultural influence, and their reasoning was... So it was they were happy for a Malaysian DJ to DJ, just not me, because apparently a foreign person playing electronic music to locals would subvert good Muslim people who were walking past, going to the mall.
Whereas if a Malaysian DJ played exactly the same tunes, he wasn't.
Correct. So I was like...
It's not even thinly veiled racism.
I was like, that suits me fine. And so I ended up having a vodka, and just of all the random things, it was quite late in the year, and it was when Zouk Out was happening in Singapore.
Yeah.
Zouk put a big, large outdoor beach event in. Yeah. And this guy walked past, and I was like, I'm pretty sure that's Dimitri from Paris. And so I called him, and he turned around, and I was like, come and have a drink. And so we ended up having a drink, and he was like just aimlessly wandering around.
Did you know him beforehand, or you just like, hey, Dimitri?
He was playing at Zouk later that night, because
Right.
Zouk had a nightclub in KL at that stage. He was playing in KL, and then the next morning he was flying to Singapore.
Hey, that's a good opening for a conversation to a very well-known DJ that you've never met before. Is you'll never guess what just happened, which is probably what you said first, right?
Yeah, I'll be like, well, no, we were chatting, but he was aimlessly wandering around looking for a coffee because his hotel was over the road.
Hey, have you done radio over the years, Rob? Have you been in the
yeah.
George fold for a little bit? And what's the? I'm from a radio background, so
when George first started, I did a lot of shows, a lot of fill-ins.
I did in 1999.
If people went overseas, I would basically, for a few months or something. I filled in for Luke Thompson
DJ
for
Phil.
like 2 months once or something, And then, I was always working full time as well and DJing a lot. So, and then I didn't play the favourites game.
Yeah.
What
do you think about what's happened to it? It's a real shame, right?
Well, I think the people who own it can do whatever they want. I think that they've moved a long way from their roots. I just got a new car recently, and so I've started listening to the radio in the car, and I've got George programmed. I've never lasted more than about 30 seconds on it. It's just I turn it over and I'm like, what am I listening to? It sounds like someone juggling skill saws.
What I find, that's like someone once described to me.
But they're obviously doing well because their numbers are okay as far as I understand.
Someone once described, this makes me think of this. Someone once described Mikey Havocs DJing to me as 2 shoes and a dryer.
Pair of sneakers and a dryer.
Pair of sneakers and a dryer.
I've heard that. I've heard that in relation to Mikey.
Yeah, bless him, love him. But with a big grin.
Totally.
It's funny, interesting with that. You say a company can do what they want, and I guess
absolutely,
that's free market capitalism. You're right. right. But what I do find interesting there, that bugs the hell out of me, but you see no one will ever stick up for themselves who's got these shows, because we all know about how shows get you gigs and DJs enjoy doing them and da-da-da-da,
Yeah.
is I find it really interesting how at night time they're still happy to adopt the old George formula of, we don't pay you.
Yes, absolutely.
because you're doing it for love. It's like, hang on a minute, you can't have your cake but clearly you can. And there's that's an interesting thing often in creative endeavours, is like
There'll always be
they
excess of people.
know, that's right, they know, the DJ knows deep down that if they say, will you pay me, then they'll be replaced.
And they know there's always a long queue of people who are willing to do it for free. And so, I mean, just from a music snob point of view, you think, you've been in the game long enough, you think you know better than everyone, and Greg probably thinks the same, everyone does, is that I look at it and go, they've gone a long way from their roots, but that's what they wanted to do as a business.
Yeah.
But in terms of what they could have been in terms of artistically, they don't mean a lot to me. But when Greg and them play, or Bevan does his show still, I'll sometimes tune in.
It's still great shows.
And I'll be like, this is cool. But
entertainment and music together. Mark Slave's show, Slave's show's great on Sundays. Perfect time when I'm pottering around here doing stuff.
And I listen to Bobby sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And those shows, if for those guys, a lot of those guys actually are, entertainment is their job. And the thing these days with fees and stuff is those shows can get you bloody good New Year's gigs and stuff, because your name's out there.
Yeah.
A lot of my students are listening to George now, man. It's changed every year. I ask. Used to be a couple of hands go up. Now it's a big mainstream station.
And I think to an extent, because I worked and I was studying for a long time while I was DJing full time, and then I was working full time while I was DJing a lot. I have always had possibly the luxury of being able to treat DJing purely as a creative pursuit for myself. So I have never gone.
You haven't done this. You haven't done the circuit.
I'm not a circuit DJ. And I haven't done the. I will play this music because it will get me more gigs and therefore more money, which is what I would determine a circuit DJ to be. Whereas Bevan and Greg play what they like, what they want, and they still get the gigs.
Yeah,
and
ideal.
And I get offered quite a few gigs, and probably half the gigs I get offered, I say you're probably better off getting someone else.
How often do you play now?
Probably 3 gigs a month.
Cool.
And then over summer, probably 8 gigs a month.
Right, nice.
So it's still a fair amount.
Maybe I need to get back on the bike.
Yeah. But for me, as I said, but I also think that the flip side of that, not DJing as much and not having the financial pressure to have to DJ, is that I feel like I'm much better at what I do.
Yeah.
I have a better idea of the music, the better idea of the subgenres I can span, and it's more indulgent. And so when I do play gigs, like I played with DJ Pierre when he came to Auckland last year, and is that the gigs mean a lot more to me.
Yeah. They're calendar events for
rather
you.
than being swapping my time for money.
So completely not to do with playing dance music to people. You've just described exactly what I've said to a few people about this podcast, because I've done broadcast stuff in the past, or I've done things that are analogous. I just do this to do it, to meet people, to chat to them. It uses those skills, but I've got my day job, and it's great. And it's just like I try and get one up a week, and so I get all of that. And then with the DJing thing, mine's even far less than yours. Yeah, occasionally someone will be like, there'll be a birthday or a marriage or something, and it's people who aren't going to hassle me to play stuff I don't have. Yeah, and I go down and play nice music to good people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah.
So you're looking at my Facebook photos the other day, and you spot Professor Wayne Hope.
Oh yeah.
He's a professor now. He's the highest. He's one of the highest. What do you call it? It's not. What are they called academically? Are they
tenure?
Tenure titles.
Yeah.
He's one of. We have professors in the department now, because you went through the comms department, right?
Yeah. So
what sent you back to postgrad study later in life? I did the same.
Well, I did marketing earlier on.
2010, did you say? No, 2000. When did you go back?
2000.
Oh, 2000.
Yes, so I did a postgrad in communications and public relations at AUT under Joseph Peart.
So a postgrad,
the great Joseph. So that was
you would have been one of the first comms students.
It was the second year they'd done the postgrad. Yeah. So that year was also I think it was the first year that the people were finishing the Bachelor of Communications. I
think the Bachelor started about 97 or something, or 96. Yeah.
So we actually did some of the same papers, including mass comm theory with Dr. Hope.
Yeah, I teach that. I teach that now.
Yeah, it's so good.
That's why that was the teaching team for. It's called media comm now.
Yeah.
You could think of obvious reasons it's not called mass communication now.
because it sounds wrong.
Yeah, because it's like...
Of course, the textbook was Karenin Gurevich.
Oh, no textbooks now, son.
Oh, yeah. We had to go and buy this
readings online.
I actually got one of my textbooks out recently.
Yeah.
A friend of mine was really winding me up about media conspiracies and stuff, and I'm like, before we talk about this further, can I just send you something to read?
Yeah.
And so I got it out of my bookcase. Like, I read lots of books, like almost a book a week. So I pulled out this book, and I opened it, and it still had the receipt in it from when I bought it from Uni Services, and it was like $65. I cannot believe how much we had to spend on textbooks. We used to
spend so much on textbooks, and the other thing we used to have to do at Vic, I don't know about you, is so the readings that are now PDFs online, we used to have to pay for a book that the university put together of the readings. Must have been a copyright thing. Back to what you say about your friends and okay, so obviously I'm am I biased? Is that the right word? I'm interested in the area, and that's why I've ended up teaching it. Very, very interested in it. But I think most, if not all, humans in the society, the way it's currently structured and the way information gets conveyed, should do some version of that. What's taught in those courses. I think we'd have different people in government. I think we'd have a different understanding of the media. I think fake news wouldn't be a problem because most people would spot it as bullshit from a mile away. We don't get our messages in church halls or whatever anymore. The media is. Yeah, and did it open your eyes?
Oh, it absolutely opened my eyes.
Yeah.
But broader reading. Like I'm a big follower of, say for example, podcast by Sam Harris.
Yeah.
And then I've just bought a book called The Strange Death of Europe by Douglas Murray, who's an English academic.
Yeah.
And these are general interest books, and what I get from discussions I have with people I know who I consider to be very intelligent people, compared to general Facebook banter when people say, "Oh, bloody government conspiracy" or whatever, is that and also the example of Donald Trump being elected is that the climate in the last probably 10 years has changed so much because of the way people get their information from their newsfeed on Facebook or on Twitter, and that the messages have got shorter and simpler, but they've also ended up having to compete. Those messages have to compete with each other, so they act like they're competing, so they've become more outrageous. And so the vitriol's got worse,
and fiction's blurred with hard content,
and the exaggerations got worse, and so you end up with this thing that I notice more and more, and it's not paying out younger people or people who didn't go to have tertiary education. Is that more and more people? I'm just amazed that they cannot spot how obvious a lie some things are.
Yeah, or they can't.
It's amazing.
Or they can't spot how obviously.
And the discernment seems to be disappearing.
They can't spot how obviously crazy some of the conspiracy theories they believe in.
Yeah, exactly.
So for my students, it's not all of them. The ones that get it really get it, because it's probably the most academic paper we offer. You got to remember the rest of the week they're running around with cameras and stuff and doing that sort of thing. I give that big riff at the beginning, and I say, look, you guys are going to be the people that keep other people on the level. I try and say, this is really important. But at the end of the day, for a lot of them, I joke that it's like cod liver oil. It's like they don't want to take it. They don't want to take it. I'm like, you got to take this.
Yeah, exactly. and it's also one of those things. It's one of those things that you have to be naturally inclined to want to read a lot out of your area of interest to actually learn enough and have a broad enough understanding of lots of different things, which builds your ability to understand other things,
which is what
because if you're too narrow,
which is what any higher learning should do. Teach you how to do all of that stuff.
And you always hear people talk about when they're at first year university and they have to do these compulsory papers, and they're like, I don't want to do that. I'll never have to learn that. But it wasn't about learning that thing. It was about understanding the ability to learn something that you're not interested in that may not be useful, because it actually builds your ability to form logical arguments or to work things out or to solve problems.
Or to discern information, sort wheat from chaff. What has been nice is a couple of people have said to me, before my time, because I'm new to, in the scheme of things, to being an academic. It was never planned. It's been from about 2011 onwards, is people who've done the comms degree before I was around there teaching, going, I hated that paper at the time, but I got to about 25 or 26, and I was like, I'm so glad I did that.
Yeah.
Sort of like
I agree.
The stuff they remembered. Yeah. So I think I cut you off before. Why did you go? You went back to do postgrad, purely for employment reasons, or no, just to expand the mind?
I was one of those people who, when I came back from living overseas in Japan, I had to wait till the beginning of the next year, which was 95, 96. And so I just signed up for AUT, and I was doing the Bachelor of Marketing.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bachelor of Marketing. So when I got
In the
into
business school.
In the business school. When I got into the year where you could do some elective papers, there was one paper called Marketing Communication.
Yeah.
And it was done by two lecturers, a marketing lecturer and a communication lecturer.
Can you remember who they were? I'll tell you if they were still there.
Dave Bibby was the marketing
Okay, I
one,
don't know that guy.
and the communication one was Joseph Pett.
Yes, right.
And Joseph Pett passed away a
Yes,
few
he
years
did.
ago. Good man, I love Joseph. Such a good man. So when I was doing that paper, I was just like, wow, this is much more me, because all of the people I knew who'd done marketing, when you went into the professional world and got into a marketing role, invariably it started off as a sales rep or something, and that was never really my
There's cold calls in.
It's not my thing.
Yeah.
So I did that paper, and then he just happened to say to me, blah, blah, and I wondered what other papers we could do, and he said, we actually now offer this graduate diploma in communications and public relations.
Cool.
I'm like, done, sign me up.
Yeah.
And he's
Postgrad
like, actually, there's a big funnel of people who want to do this.
Yeah.
We've only got about 35 places.
Yeah.
And so in my head, I was kind of like, what do I do? Got a reference from someone and a few things, and then I got into it, and it was one of those, in the early days, it was, as you imagine, public relations, it was, I think it was 32 females and 3 males.
Hasn't changed much. I can walk into a first year class,
Yeah.
and I can make an educated guess before they even know who's going to do PR.
Yeah, exactly. But this communication and public relations,
Yeah.
it also had radio and journalism and stuff. That was what the name of the course was.
Are you blonde?
Now
Are you blonde and female and from the North Shore?
Yeah.
And in this class, you're probably going to end up doing PR.
Yeah, and so I mean, I still work in PR, but I jokingly call it man PR, because I don't do consumer brands, I don't do launch events. We do science and technology related stuff mostly. But so that's how I got into the postgrad, and I loved it. I thoroughly loved it. After I'd gone and done some work for a year, I thought I'll do a master's.
Yeah.
And then, as it turned out, they were just offering the masters at that stage, and it was one of those sad situations where you sign up for the papers that you want to do, and then they come back to you and say, like, 4 of the 7 papers you want to do, we've withdrawn them.
Because there's two people wanted to do them.
Because we got 7 people instead of 9. And
Yeah.
you're kind of like, and then they're like, do these 3. And I'm like, I don't want to do those papers, So it ended up being tricky. But I did get a chance to do some stuff with Wayne, and I remember that my the précis for what I was going to do, the reading paper in the first year, was actually on the influence of sponsorship on sporting events, and because the America's Cup was around that time, and it was, say for example, the need for sponsorship and the need to televise stuff was actually changing yachting, because you had to make it televisable, so they're making the races shorter,
rugby, didn't
closer
it?
to shore, so you could film them and stuff, and then likewise how things like cigarette sponsorship would change things, and then rugby obviously it changed it, but it was more about, not so much about how it changed. It actually changed the rules of yachting. It actually shortened the format.
With other sports, I'm sure. Hasn't it changed the breaks in football and stuff? And I'm out of my expertise.
In Australian rules, they have a thing when someone scores a proper goal, I think they call it. I can't remember what it's called. They actually have a light in the stadium, which is on, and it lets them know that the ad break's still going, and then it starts counting down that the ad break's getting ready to finish, and then the guy kicks off just when the light turns green, and it changes back from ads just as the guy's kicking off. It's so well done. But I mean, I'm a sports fanatic. So I
don't. Anyone from work listens. I don't want to lose the support of some of my colleagues, and I can tell you've got a well-rounded way to look at things and a sense of humour. Of all the majors, because you didn't do the degree, but there's different. The majors are journalism, TV, radio, digital media. This is these days, creative industries. I feel like I'm missing one or two, and then PR. And PR is often joked about like it's the devil major of all of them. And you can't sort of place... There was actually a suggestion at work recently that PR and journalism become a lot more linked as majors in both sides.
They end up changing fences.
Right.
Often,
so a lot of people end up working in both. Anyway, that's here or there. But it sounds like doing science and technology PR, unless you're doing stuff like, telling people that this brand of cigarettes is okay. It sounds like you're doing quite ethical PR.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Or are you?
The gentleman I work for. The gentleman I work for is he was the president of the Public Relations Institute for some time, Tim Marshall, and he and I have, over a long period of time, like 13, 14 years, we always chat about the ethics in PR, and we're well aware that you speak to some people, they're like paid liars, or because people see the bad side of PR generally.
Well, that's right.
In terms of the shilling and the cigarette company and stuff. But what people don't realise, I'm not trying to patronise people, but a lot of people don't realise that there's that's only 1/10 of it. The
Totally.
other 9/10
And I-
are people doing good.
And you know
good
I was
day-to-day
winding
stuff,
you up, and I'm
which,
not
oh,
that
totally,
agree.
which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
supporting marketing. And
Yeah.
I've always had in my mind. I like to think I've always done it, that I would never do any
Anything you thought wasn't ethical.
any stuff that had even significant political ramifications one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's just not what I want to get into.
What if it was your political beliefs?
Well, that would be totally different.
Yeah.
Because that would be me,
Yeah.
away from my career. But yeah, absolutely.
No, I mean, would you wouldn't work in PR for a party that you support?
No.
Right, that's what it's meaning.
No, but that said, I mean, as they say, someone comes to you with a checkbook. Sometimes you go, hey, you find a new version of the ethics to justify it to yourself.
It's such a after everything else we just talked about in this whole kind of media riff, education riff at the end. It's such an interesting area because because humans have got better at this shit. So everything is just so highly manipulated now.
Yeah,
and people, for better and for worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm constantly in awe of stuff that I see in politics because and when I talk about politics, I mean I look at, say, people like David Seymour, and I look at people like Winston Peters and people like Peter Dunn who are coming from different areas, and I look at them and I appreciate what they're doing well. Just for what they're doing well, not looking at it and going, I support what they're doing.
Yeah.
And say, for example, Materia Turia doing this really, really well-crafted PR thing about admitting that she had committed effectively benefit fraud in the early 90s. And, my mind is not looking at it from the point of view of saying, do I support her or do I vilify her or do I think it's bad or good or should she pay the money back or whatever. I think of it from the point of view is that how did they sit down and formulate this from a strategic point of view? And sometimes you find out they didn't do it strategically. It was just luck. And sometimes you find out that it was really, really well crafted. And I think that was a brilliant piece of PR because the people who are throwing barbs at her, they were never going to support the Greens anyway.
No,
and so they're shoring up their base. But then on if you look at the other end of the spectrum, it's Winston Peters who, for 3 years of an election cycle, seems kind of like every time round it's like, man, he's gone off the edge now. This guy's
he's
too old for it.
He's amazing.
And then he manages in the last 9 months to just shore his messages up, make a couple of key messages. He believes in the explaining his losing mantra, and he just nails it. And everyone, all the other political parties must just be going, bollocks. Believe
you me. For me, it's not necessarily PR, but obviously, I think that's exactly how I.
Well, it's just from the communication point of view.
I deconstruct stuff
and
as
the
well.
strategy.
But I was just saying that the other day to someone. I was like, Winnie, I was like, he's getting a lot of free screen time compared to everyone else, and that's really masterful. That free screen time.
Yeah.
Whatever you're saying, up to an election. That's why he does what he does.
And this is the thing is that, and I'm not at all suggesting that he was anything like Donald Trump, but Donald Trump was good at saying getting screen time with short sound bites.
Yeah.
Even if some people are going to knock you for it, is actually better than not having it or making a message too complicated that people won't get it.
I think Winnie would be more fun to hang out with than Donald.
Oh yes.
Do you know what PR's greatest act of PR ever was?
Active PR was Christianity?
No, changing the name from propaganda to PR.
Oh. Yeah, well, see, the thing is, I always thought of propaganda as, I mean, I get
I don't know if that's
propaganda was more about hoodwinking people.
Yeah.
Public relations was more about building relationships.
Oh, listen to this PR guy.
Yeah. No, but that's kind of how I looked at it, is that I treat, when I speak to people about getting DJ gigs and and the avenues I go through to do it, doing mixes and stuff, that's PR for my DJing.
Yeah.
And likewise when I
we're all engaged in PR.
Exactly. It's basically, as I said, it's managing relationships with parties and publics, plural, which have some impact on the situation. So, when I lined up in the local alcohol policy, when I started getting involved, I lined up all of the councillors at Auckland Council, all of them, and then I looked at if they'd ever made comments about it before, put it into a spreadsheet, started looking, and then I found a few people who looked like they were quite good guys, like Chris Darby, who were like good guys who were approachable, met up with them, chatted to them,
open-minded,
and they were really nice in terms of sitting there chatting to them, gave me good education on how to chat with the next one,
Yeah.
and the next one, and the next one, and then and so for me it was a big learning process, and I tried to make it as diligent as possible. I kept a spreadsheet which was a log of all the contact I had with people,
Yeah.
and then if I said I'd do something, highlight it in red, and if I did it, make it green, and and this spreadsheet is massive now over 4 years. But I was just because you can't remember all this stuff otherwise, chatting to people, and I consider those acts to be public relations for this course,
Yeah.
or communications for this course. Even though if you explain it to most people, they'd say that's not public relations.
So incidentally, you've very skillfully brought the podcast full circle for
Full
the end,
circle,
coming
yeah.
back to the
Yeah.
to the initial reason we decided to have a chat. I know this isn't why you did it, but I hope someone at a venue along the way buys you a beer or says thanks, and it's great. It's a great thing you've done, kind of off your own back. Do you think, just in closing, that this will lead to you kind of doing anything different career-wise? Or it sounds like you're almost going to do law late in life now. Goodness.
No, I do think I already have some plans that I think we need to have a nighttime commission or a night czar or a night mayor type of scenario in Auckland, so that there is an understanding in the council that the nightlife is important. That
you need
youth
someone
culture,
agitating,
and especially and it's not just from a nightlife point of view, business point of view. It's that youth need some reason to do stuff on the weekends.
Yep.
They need safe places to do it.
Yep.
We're better off having in concert with education and better parenting or whatever over long term. We need to have these places where people can go, and that also.
And then also that person would be reporting from the front line as to actually what's going on.
Exactly.
Because it's their job. Hey, we
And then
better stop or
initiative-
we'll go another 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But I did say, I don't know if I can talk for 80 minutes. I said, you wait and see as soon as you start.
Once you get
Thanks for
talking.
coming in, Rob.
Thank you,
Been
man.
a pleasure.